Hello and welcome to the July astrology forecast. Today I'll share tips for navigating the major aspects this month, including declination aspects. I'll also share some dates for timing important actions. Check out the blog post that accompanies this video on Astrology University for a full list of the major aspects and dates. Now, if you're brand new to declination and you just want to know what it is, check out my YouTube video, What is Declination? All right, with that, let's get started. This month, the energy settles down a little bit after last month's out of bounds peak when Mercury and Venus were both in high declination, which had both planets expressing more in terms of extremes and put more emphasis on both planets and their significations. Mercury and Venus have started heading back down now in terms of declination, but we still have our usual two out of bounds periods for the moon this month. First, July 3rd to 7th with the moon out of bounds in Gemini and Cancer, and then July 17th to the 21st with the moon out of bounds in Sagittarius and Capricorn. And then we get a third little bit of extra out of bounds this month, just because of the length of the month and the way it's laid out, on July 30th when the moon goes back into Gemini for a second time in July, and it's also out of bounds for a couple of days before the month is over. Now, the moon out of bounds dates are really worth noting for emotional emphasis in those areas of your chart. Of course, these days pass by pretty quickly, but we have a concentrated set of days, about 4 to 5 days each month, that we can pay attention to. We might have especially strong reactions on those days, and putting those reactions into context can be really helpful. Sometimes our emotional responses are warranted, but sometimes they're a little bit over the top relative to what's actually happening, especially during the out of bounds periods. Now, if you have the natal moon in one of these 4 signs, that's Gemini, Cancer, Sagittarius, or Capricorn, do an experiment and observe the moon's return in your chart over the next few months, because it'll be out of bounds every time. Notice if you do have strong emotional responses on those days, whether that's for the positive or the negative. If you have any great stories to share, I'd love to hear them. In other news, Jupiter in Gemini is in full swing now, dispersing our focus in multiple directions. Jupiter in Gemini wants to make us aware of different ideas and expose us to more information, as if we don't already have access to way too much information. But the trick is to thoughtfully integrate this info into our current worldview and avoid getting distracted or thrown off course. This will really be something to pay attention to over the next year if you have natal Jupiter in one of the mutable signs. What's your baseline worldview? What gives you a sense of meaning and purpose? Some of this new info coming in will be helpful, and some of it is just going to be random. It's up to you to sort it and explore it, and then weave it into your life in a meaningful way, and then just toss out what's not actually important. Mars will move into Gemini later in the month, around July 20th, and it won't make the conjunction with Jupiter until next month, so we'll go over that next time. But in the first 2/3 of the month, we'll have Mars in Taurus. Now, Mars in Taurus has a bad rap in our tradition. One of the ideas is that being in Taurus slows Mars down, and it also gives it more of a Venusian influence, which is thought of as somewhat contrary to the Mars agenda. As I think about how that works, though, I'm thinking, well, that doesn't actually sound bad, that slowing down of Mars. Or at least it can certainly be turned into an asset. I think of Mars and Taurus like a bricklayer, moving slowly and building something really solid in the process. I was recently reading an article about determination in Psychology Today, just thinking about this concept of determination to go along with Mars in Taurus. The author Paul Zare writes about determination while reflecting on Muhammad Ali. And keep in mind that this is a non-astrological article, but it's really on topic for what we're thinking about here. Now, Muhammad Ali happens to have been born with a Taurus midheaven and Mars nearby in Taurus. And he said that being a champion is much more than physical training, and that in addition, champions, quote, have to have the skill and the will, but the will must be stronger than the skill. So he's really speaking to the strength of will and determination. And Zare goes on to say that this concept of determination and will to succeed was clearly at the core of Ali throughout his life. Now, it's funny that our tradition describes Mars and Taurus then as a weak placement, when that's one of the worst descriptions for Muhammad Ali's career and this energy that he was just so well known for, and also also, this energy led to some of his greatest success. Of course, there's more going on in his chart that speaks to that, but Mars in Taurus was certainly an important planet in this mix. So instead of describing Mars in Taurus too simplistically in a negative light, let's think about the projects this month that we want to put some concerted effort into. If you have important planets in Earth signs, this version of Mars being in Taurus might help you focus your energy while you work, and at the same time make it easier to take some time off to rest afterwards. Well, that's always a good thing. This is a Venus-ruled sign after all, so you might be looking at a work hard, rest harder kind of dynamic. When Mars moves into Gemini on July 20th, things lighten up quite a bit, but the energy also gets dispersed. So use this time with Mars and Taurus for that focused, concerted effort. Mercury will move into Leo as the month starts, making it a little easier to talk about ourselves and to take up some space with our words. That's as long as the fear of rejection doesn't cause us to hold back more than we should. But be aware of both talking and listening while Mercury's in Leo. Remember that it feels great to be heard and seen, so offer that as a gift too to those that you're talking to, and balance that out with how much you're compelled to share and take up space yourself. And that brings us to one of the peak aspects this month, which also introduces some wildcard energy as Mars makes a conjunction and parallel with Uranus on July 15th. And remember, that's the strongest kind of aspect we can experience. The moon will be in Scorpio that day, making an opposition to Mars and Uranus, while Mercury is hanging out in territory that's pretty close to a square with both of them. We might want to stay aware that our words could ignite strong emotional reactions in others, or even spark a revolution of sorts. We might be feeling some pretty strong emotions in the face of disruption or impulsive reactivity from others that also has an unruly but stubborn quality. So we're all kind of reacting together in this mix. I just thought of the image of the monkey wrench that gets thrown in our path. And that's really interesting because I looked up Edward Abbey, who wrote the novel The Monkey Wrench Gang, and he had natal Mars in Taurus along with the moon square Uranus, which has a resonance with this transit that I was just talking about on July 15th and 16th. Now, if you're more on the instigating end of that disruption, or let's say in honor of Abby's work, maybe even a little bit of sabotage, make sure that your intentions have purpose and meaning, and be ready for the emotional fallout that might ensue as a result of your actions. Now, there's a grand water trine that forms the next day between the moon, the sun, and Neptune, and that turns this aspect into a kite. Well, that's fascinating because the kite is one of the most productive aspect patterns. A perfect balance of emotion, inspiration, and purpose can combine to fuel our actions here, and maybe something's even liberated in the process. To turn on the potential of the grand trine that's in this mix and the kite aspect, do something to get yourself into the zone on the 15th and 16th, whatever that means for you. Maybe it's tapping into your emotions, turning up the volume in terms of your passion, playing some moving music, and then intentionally directing all that energy into form. This might be one of the more interesting periods this month to pay attention to. Well, before we wrap up, I'll just share a couple of days for those of you who need to take an important action this month. Now, these days aren't dramatically great in terms of astrological aspects, but there's a little bit of juju you can harness to enhance just whatever you need to do. If this is something that you want to grow, you'll probably want to aim for the time just after the new moon in Cancer. Wait until about 12 hours after the new moon, and then on July 6th, you'll have a little window until the moon goes void and changes signs, and that's around 8:49 p.m. Pacific time on July 6th. So you have pretty much a whole day, although you really just have a window in the morning, and I'll tell you about that. Now, you can tap into the moon applying to conjunct Venus in Cancer and sextile Uranus and trine Neptune on that day, but you're going to have to aim for the early morning if you want to line up the moon in Cancer with the ascendant, because by the time the moon gets to the midheaven, that conjunction with Venus starts to separate. So for best results, you might aim for a time just before that. The other day to hold in mind this month takes place during the waxing moon, and that's usually better for projects that are already in play, already in progress, or things that you want to wrap up or come to closure with or end. And that's on July 28th with the moon in Taurus. That day you can pick up a sextile with Saturn or a square to Venus, or even a conjunction with Uranus, and each of those has a different asset. Keep in mind that the square between Jupiter and Saturn is coming into range on that day as well, and work that into your plans. Just be conscious of it. We'll talk a little bit more about the meaning of Jupiter square Saturn next month. Well, thanks for listening, friends. Check out our calendar at astrologyuniversity.com www.astrologeruniversity.com/events for our upcoming live events, like the webinar Saturn in Myth and Psyche with Jason Hawley. Remember that all of our webinars are available to stream with lifetime access after the presentation, so even if you can't attend on that day, you can still watch the presentation after. Also, I want to let you know that we're on our summer break from our astrologer training program, and we start the new year again in mid-August. Now, once a year, we open up registration with a special offer that we call bundle registration, and that opens up this year around July 15th. So, if you've been wanting to deepen your astrological studies, consider joining us. As a side benefit to signing up with a new cohort of students who are all going to work through the material at the same time, you'll get to make new friends and join a supportive community of like-minded folks. If you have logistical questions about our program, email our help team at help@astrologeruniversity.com. And if you want to talk with me personally and find out whether the program is a good fit for you, just ask the help team to help you make a free advising appointment. All right, well, that takes me to the end of this month's forecast. I hope you're able to make good use of the planetary energies this month, and until next time, take good care.